Hi, my name is Varant. I'm one of the co-founders here at Zipline AI, and today we'll be building a streaming user embedding pipeline using Zipline and Claude Code. So a quick overview of the pipeline that we'll be building. You can see the data sources here on the left. It's going to take a streaming user activities source as an input, enrich it with a dim listings table, which is a batch table, in this case in BigQuery, to pull in some enriched information, do an aggregation to get the last 100 categories of items that a user interacted with, and then pass that to a simple text embedding model to get kind of a rudimentary user embedding from this text of their last 100 interactions. It'll stick that into a vector store and give us a serving endpoint to fetch it from. So I'm going to build this pipeline using this prompt, and this is basically just a natural language explanation of that pipeline, much like I described on the previous slide. So let's jump over to Claude Code and see how this goes. And here we are in Claude Code. I'm just going to paste that prompt that I showed you earlier and set it loose. So we're using Claude Code here, but you could use any coding agent that you prefer. Basically, what it's going to do is use the Zipline skill, which is just found and loaded here successfully to build this pipeline. Zipline skill basically gives it a few very useful tools in the toolkit to be able to build these pipelines effectively. And we should see that it's going to start using those tools here momentarily. It hits a few issues early on, but it should be able to recover from those. And here we can see it invoke the first useful tool already. So this is going to be the table inspection tool. So we told it that we wanted to build this pipeline off of the user activities data. And you can see here that it used Zipline, the Zipline skill to basically inspect that data source, find the schema, and it's going to get this information from BigQuery or Kafka or PubSub or Amazon Glue or whatever catalog you're using. In this case, it's a combination of BigQuery and PubSub. And it's going to use that to understand the data source, the schema, and some metadata about that. It should have done the same thing as well with the listing level information. And from there, it's going to go ahead and start planning this job. But you can see that it also kind of looks at your existing feature definitions. So it says, hey, I found some listing level features already in the repository. It's probably going to see if it can reuse any of that transformations that's already defined, which is great for two reasons. One for code simplicity, but also for compute simplicity, because that means you can also reuse the compute. So we can see here it's authored the first part of this pipeline, and it looks correct. It found the PubSub topic, and it's enriching it with this dim listings group by that already exists in the repository. If you're unfamiliar with the Chronon API, don't worry about it too much, but basically these are just listing level features that we are sticking onto this event stream as the first part of this pipeline. So that looks correct. And I'm going to let it go ahead. And next, what we should see is it will probably go ahead and perform that aggregation, which is the second part of our pipeline. Okay, here we are. So this is basically taking that join. And yeah, it's doing this. So it's taking the input that we it's taking the join that we defined earlier as the input. That's that parent join. And here it's doing a group by on the user ID key and aggregating. So, aggregating by user ID and taking the last K with a parameter of 100. So the last 100 event category pairs. So what it's actually doing here is taking the event type like add to cart or checkout and concatenating it with the primary category, which looks fine. So yeah, I'm just going to set it loose and let it go from there and use this to kind of show you some of the other tools in the toolbox while it goes ahead and writes some more code. So it just wrote this conf. And one of the things that it's going to do here in a moment is you're going to see it call eval on this configuration. And so eval is a useful tool both for the agent as well as for humans. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you kind of what eval does here by clicking it myself while Claude proceeds with authoring the pipeline. So eval essentially takes the definition that you wrote here. So this is a transformation that takes an input and does an aggregation. And it just makes sure, it helps you make sure that everything that you wrote here is semantically sound and valid. So it does that by basically understanding the full lineage. So here it says, okay, upstream of this group by is this parent join. Upstream of that, there was a couple data sources, including these listing level features, which we had previously defined, and the user activities and the listings BigQuery export before that. And it's going to take the input schema and the transformation at every stage of this graph and just make sure that everything is valid. So, if you did something wrong, like sum over a string, it would catch it here and give you a helpful error message. And Claude can actually use those error messages to make sure that it's authoring these pipelines correctly. So, as it goes and as it writes these configs, it's basically going to be calling this eval tool here to make sure that everything it wrote is valid and it's not misspelling a column name or hallucinating a column name that doesn't actually exist. So this is just a really nice way to guarantee that everything that Claude does will run when I go ahead and kick off a backfill or kick off a streaming job or whatever I'm going to do after. I have very high likelihood or very high certainty, rather, that it's going to work as expected. So you can see here it's starting to run eval, and yeah. Oh, in this case it's it's correct. So this eval passed. It's saying, okay, this is the output of my. This looks like the output of the streaming event that was enriched. You can see here it's pulling in actually a lot of listing level information, and it's only going to use the primary category, which is here somewhere. So once this is done, we should basically see that it's, oh yeah, here we go. It's like the model transform. So it actually already wrote that model transform, and see that there's an error here. So it's going to go ahead and fix that probably and iterate on that until that's correct. So it had a typo basically in the SQL, which is fine. It's going to fix that, and it's going to try again. And now it's trying to eval it again. Let's see. Okay, got it right this time. So this is an example of how that eval tool is actually really useful. Okay, and there we have it. It says it's done. So I see it gave me this model transform here. Oh, whoops! I actually didn't mean to close Claude there, but that's okay. It was basically just going to say that all the validations passed. So here's the model transform that it wrote for us. It validated this and made sure that everything is correct. So now if we want to run this and see it live, see it running a streaming job in action, all we have to do is click this deploy button. Okay, this went ahead and submitted a job to Zipline, and I can follow this link to see that job. Okay, you can see here it's starting to run a bunch of things. You can also see that some of these things were already successful. And that's because, again, if it reuses any existing definitions, and those definitions have already been backfilled, in this case, it's exports from BigQuery, then it's going to, not recompute those, but go ahead and, reuse the existing data, which is good. And you can see here it's going to do a few things, including starting a streaming job, and then, call the model transform and the model transform upload. You can also see that pipeline here laid out more topographically, including the listings level enrichment, the streaming job, and the model transform. So once this is done, what we'll be able to do is come back here and hit fetch on this, which will let us actually query that serving endpoint that this is going to spin up at the end of the pipeline. So I have another pipeline here that I ran earlier just to show you what that looks like. So here, this is a simple listing level embedding model, and we can just query it for a sample listing here, and we can see that it returns the embedding vector. So that's it. That's all we're going to cover today. There's a lot that we didn't cover, including including a lot of the details of what the Zipline orchestrator is doing here, as it takes this pipeline that we defined and breaks it down into smaller jobs. As well as, of course, backfilling. I mean, one of the main really useful parts of Zipline is that you can backfill these features that you create in a way that's temporally consistent with the online serving. So as you write these streaming features, let's say if I were to use this like user category feature in a model, in like a checkout model or a payments model or a fraud model, I could backfill that over an arbitrarily long window, and the data that I would see is actually guaranteed to be consistent with what we see online in production when we serve that data. So it's a really useful property of Zipline. You can see here the backfill job. Again, it's going to reuse some of the same computation that the streaming job is doing. But anyway, we'll cover a lot of that stuff in a different demo. For now, we just wanted to show you what's possible using the Zipline skill and AI coding to build these relatively complex pipelines easily. Thanks, and stay tuned for more demos.